Thank you to the Tile colleagues for having me. And thank you for not choosing the Lego lecture down the hall, which sounds much more entertaining. I probably would have gone to that. So there we go. I'm just here to talk to you very briefly today about a small intervention or a small invention in how to overlay video into PowerPoint when we're presenting asynchronously. And it's an original piece of research that's been done into it as well, where we've conducted some interviews with some of our students afterwards to see which video method is more appropriate. So I'll go briefly through a technological input on how to do it. And I'll go through the evidence base that supports it as well, but it should be relatively useful to you, even if you just take away the technological side of it. Essentially, that's what we've been using over the last couple of years. We've been using annotated lectures on top of PowerPoints when we've been using it as a part of a blended learning approach. So when we've been delivering asynchronous content to students, we've been narrating lectures, we've been drawing on lectures. And as you can probably tell from that, I am an extremely poor artist. So the question came as to how can we do this better? And can we interweave PowerPoint presentations? Can we interweave video into this, or higher quality video into the content that we're providing for students to try and engage them better? We already know about the problems with engagement in blended learning, so this is an exploration of whether or not we can better engage these students and how we can do that as well. So can video help, and is it an appropriate and easy thing to insert into our presentations? The other version of it you may see is embedded or Cameo, which is a new additive to the PowerPoint software where you're able to feature yourself as video. So we did consider that as well. It's one of the other methods that we've put forward as part of it. But what we essentially did as part of our project, or my project, I don't know who the hour is, but is give students 4 types of modalities, 4 different types of pre-recorded video lecture over 4 weeks. So it's a cohort of about 40 students. They're health science students, so they're predominantly practically and simulation taught, but obviously we still have to teach them the theory of content of how these things work, so anatomy, physiology, interventions, drugs, and the rest of it. So we've given them a narrated lecture. We've given them a narrated lecture with annotation, so those terrible drawings that you saw a second ago. We've given them statically embedded video lecture over another week, which is what you would typically associate with, if you click into a PowerPoint presentation and the video appears, and then you click again, and there's sort of, there's that nervous energy if you're ever presenting it live as to whether or not it's going to work, which I will have in a second anyway. But essentially, you get that kind of jittering of PowerPoint, and it goes into the video, and then the narration takes back over afterwards. And then this picture-in-picture embedded video, which is what we've put forward as an idea, and the idea of embedded video content within it. So we gave them one of each over 4 weeks, and then after those 4 weeks were up, we interviewed them in a semi-structured fashion online over Microsoft Teams, and then subjected that interview data to thematic analysis and had a look about what they had to say. And the reason I'm here today really is to say, pay attention to what they have to say. It's a very small sample of students, but what they have to say is very interesting about blended learning, and certainly probably slightly more interesting than I was hoping, in terms of, I was actually hoping they'd be much more interested in the embedded video, but also that the embedded video did work, that it did increase engagement, and it did increase their understanding of complex topics. So there's 2 factors there that I wanted to share with you. Absolutely. So the software that we use to embed video is something called open broadcasting software. To the gamers amongst you, or to the esports staff who I've just been listening to talk about their fantastic card games upstairs, it may look familiar, but essentially these softwares are open. So this particular piece of software is open source and free. It's also available to those of you within the university on your software centre as well. You can download it to your computer as one of those approved pieces of software that you don't get the nasty admin warning about. It's an open source piece of software, which means it's free, which means it's relatively safe to use, and essentially it's used predominantly, or its explosion, or its increase in popularity is due to streaming. So in streaming, people stream themselves playing video games, or talking, or going around town, or exploring, and these sort of things as well. So there's lots of different things that goes within it, and essentially the software is designed for you to have different picture sources. Yeah, so the different picture sources that you see behind me is someone playing PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, and a chap videoing himself in his video camera, so you can see his reaction to the game as well. So what you do is you take that software, and when you export your PowerPoint presentation and you export it to an MP4 file, you load it up into OBS. And in OBS, you'll see it in the background there, and your slides will play out as that normal MP4 file. And all you have to do is you add a video capture or window capture to the below element, which you'll see in the bottom left-hand corner. You just click the plus button there, you add window capture, and in the other window that you wish to capture, you load up the video that you wish to use. Now, that could be a video that you've generated yourselves. It could be a video that's contained online. Obviously, you know the copyright uses and Creative Commons licenses that may be applied to some of these videos and what you can and can't use. Ideally, it would be video content that you generated yourself. But what you then do is you overlay it within your lecture. So you overlay it and you can control the speed, the playback at the time in which it's going to enter. You can make it smaller, bigger, however you want to make it on the screen. And then what you do once you're finished, once you've overlaid it and you're happy with the content where it is, you simply go to File, Export, and export it again as an MP4 file. And then what you're left with, hopefully, is this sort of content. So instead of what would have been that terrible drawing that you saw right at the start of my interpretation of the cruciate ligaments of the leg, you see a nicely overlaid high definition piece of quality image. You aren't reliant on YouTube's embedded functioning within PowerPoint, and you aren't reliant on any of these things as well. So what did the students think of it? Essentially, students thought that they'd increased their engagement. They thought that they helped them contextualize the images. It felt that they kept their eyes on the screen, that if they were distracted by the dog or the weather or all the other awesome things going outside, that they, answering the Amazon man at the door, that it brought their attention back to the screen as well. And it pretty much overwhelmingly felt that. So it did increase engagement, and absolutely did work with that regard. However, they did have a lot of interesting things to say about blended learning, which I think is probably worth taking forward. One is that it's high risk, high reward. Yeah. So when you're putting these solutions in place, when you're delivering asynchronous learning, the content has to be almost better than if you're right standing there in front of them. It's much easier to turn off than it is much more easier for you guys to walk out the door in this lecture right now, because I might glare at you or it might be a bit awkward. Whereas actually just shutting the laptop screen, no one seems to mind about that. The revisiting it, the butchering, students butcher your content. Doesn't matter how nice and high def you make this, they will put it in the format that they want. They will scam the audio off it and listen to it as a podcast. They'll do whatever they need to do to make that content work for them. So presenting it in the best format as possible, in the most accessible format, allows them to do what they want with it. So do bear in mind that happens. And enthusiasm. One of the things that I'm very, very cautious about, as well as my dull Wolverhampton accent, is my delivery. I talk quite fast in lectures. So when I talk on a recorded lecture, I often slow my pace right down. And one of the comments, one of the clear comments that's coming through across all of these is about enthusiasm. You can by all means adjust your delivery, but you absolutely have to maintain that enthusiasm. And enthusiasm carries through the airwaves. Students felt the enthusiasm of recorded lectures, even though you weren't there. So enthusiasm and delivery is absolutely key. So put shortly, video does work. It's an effective tool, and there are free and easy open pieces of software, open source pieces of software that you can insert into your work to produce it. It is risky. The more content that you put in, the more high def, the more fancy features that you use, the more risks you have of disengagement to students who don't look that learning style. But also, widely speaking, blended learning comes with risks, and the students identify those risks as well as part of that. Your delivery is key, and enthusiasm matters. Doesn't matter if you're delivering it as a recorded or not. And lastly, as part of this other kind of conversation that's coming up, I'm a relatively new career academic. I'm a relatively old standing paramedic, unfortunately, as well. You might doubt that from my youthful looks. But essentially, as a new qualified academic, so you have to consider the fact that you're now pretty much involved in the production of multimedia content. You're no longer just occasionally putting PowerPoints together. You are responsible for the creation of this multimedia content, and the students value that experience, and learning comes from that. So wider skill set of academics absolutely has to reflect that. And I would almost sort of suggest any new career academic to have a look at Richard Mayer's multimedia learning and the 15 principles that come with it. Any questions about it?